Hey everybody, Tomas the Tobacconist back at you again with another video in our series of how cigars are made. This is part 4. In part 1, we discussed the bunching process, how the leaf goes into a cigar to make the body of the cigar. In part 2, we discussed the wrapping process, how the wrapper plays an integral part in the flavor profile, as well as how to dress the cigar and determine the cap style, whether it's single, double, or triple cap. In part 3, we talked about flavor. Before a cigar can be made, a blend has to be developed. And before you can develop a blend, you have to understand the anatomy of taste. The other key thing in this video, we're going to discuss the motivation of the blender himself. Now, the blender is the person who is going to determine which tobaccos go into the cigar. The blender is the person who creates the flavor and the artistry of the cigar. Think of it as an artist working in a studio who is offering either a one-off piece of art or they're producing art that can be reproduced in volumes. And so in this case, here at Ultimo, we operate like a small cigar studio or small art studio in that we do produce custom blends, and that would be similar to commissioning an art piece. We also produce blends that we offer for retail and online, and that's going to be kind of more like your reproduction pieces. So when I talk about how a blender is motivated to create a blend, that can come from different places. That motivation can come from history, from their own tradition, family lineage, and it varies from blender to blender. As a first generation cigar maker myself, I don't have that family lineage to lean on. So I lean on my own personal life experiences. To give you a little bit of a background about myself and what I bring into the blending process here at Ultimo, I started in the cigar industry back in the year 2000 at the turn of the century. I know I'm old. And at that point, I was looking for just a job, and I went to go work at a cigar shop, and over 7 years, helped to grow the business, started going to Central America, working with major manufacturers to import cigars, developing blends to be able to sell through our retail stores as well as wholesale to other retailers. And I did that for 7 years. Part of that was building a website that went on to do really well. And after 7 years, I decided to walk away. And when I did, we had over $4 million in inventory, just in cigars. And so it grew and became a very successful business. I went into the wine and spirits industry and did that for about 13 years, working with brands like Courvoisier, Armand de Brignac, Ace of Spades Champagne, Cristal Champagne, Jim Beam, Knob Creek, Glenlivet. So working with a lot of really high-end brands, a lot of low-end brands as well, beers, so forth. That taught me a lot about flavor. In the wine and spirits industry, flavor is a big thing. When a manufacturer of a wine company or a bourbon distillery is trying to differentiate in the market, they're looking for ways to differentiate in terms of flavor. And so training and understanding flavor, being able as a person representing those brands, having to be able to go to bars or restaurants or retailers and be able to help them understand those flavors taught me a lot about the anatomy of taste. It taught me a lot about how flavor is developed on the palate and the olfactory system, basically the stuff we covered in the last video. Now, in the end of my career in the wine and spirits industry, I ended up working with 2 other gentlemen to build a wine company. We built a wine company for a Native American tribe, and we built that entire company from scratch. And so I, at one point, found myself soliciting our wines to another tribe, and their CEO asked me what I did before I was in the wine industry, and I told him I was in the cigar business. He says, every cigar store has a cigar store Indian, but there are no Native American cigar brands. And so at that point, that kind of stuck in my head. And my original business model was going to be to import cigars. It was never going to be to make cigars. I went through all my licensing, got a commercial space. It took me 8 months to get all my permits and bonds and insurances and everything else that's required to be a licensed manufacturer. After 2 days of having my permits, I ended up finding myself unemployed. And all the capital that I was going to put in into building the business was gone. And so I decided that, well, I'm licensed as a manufacturer, so I should make cigars. And I set out to build a blend that would have been able to appeal to almost any consumer, and something that I can start doing cigar events with, where I do live cigar rolling and stuff of that sort, pulling on my past experiences, my past knowledge of the cigar industry. So I built our flagship blend. We call it the Scissor Tail. The reason why it's called the Scissor Tail is because it's the Oklahoma State bird, and I wanted to commemorate where I'm getting my start. The reason why the company is called Ultimo, because it's the ultimate culmination of my life's experiences and my work experiences. And so I decided to call the company Ultimo, and my first cigar was the Scissor Tail. It's a blend of Dominican and African fillers with a Nicaragua binder and an Ecuador Habano wrapper. Once I started producing the cigars, I started finding that there were faults in the process, and I started refining the processes and how we manufacture. We started removing the veins from the cigar so that way the cigar doesn't get bitter. We started doing a different aging process where we do a secondary aging on the tobacco to gas off ammonia and maintain specific humidity and temperature on the tobacco so we can roll it into a cigar without adding extra water, so it doesn't have to go through what's called the sick period. Once I started developing these blends and trying to figure out, okay, well, how am I going to turn this business into something that's going to support me and my family while I look for a job, the business just took off. I started getting on newspapers and on news television stations and magazine articles. And after 6 months of looking for a job, I decided, you know what, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And so I started working with breweries and develop a cigar to pair with a specific type of beer. And I worked with a distillery to make cigars that pair with a specific type of whiskey. And I tell you all of this because part of the blending process is understanding what you want to accomplish with that blend. And it may not necessarily be just the flavor. We have to look at the oils. We have to look at the construction. We have to look at the experience we want to create and the consumer who we're creating that cigar for. In most cases, a cigar manufacturer is limited by the number of tobaccos that they carry because they're going to produce in millions, and they're producing for future demand because a cigar traditionally has to go through what's called the sick period. A sick period is a period in which the cigar has to sit and age where it's going to gas off the excess ammonia and it's going to neutralize the moisture levels in the cigar so that way it becomes a smokable product. Because we do that process when it's loose tobacco, we're able to go through our inventory in a different manner and be able to operate in more of a just-in-time model. Because we can do that, and because we produce significantly fewer cigars than a traditional large-scale manufacturer, we're able to have more flexibility in the blending process. So we have tobacco here from Nicaragua, Honduras, Dominican Republic, Africa, Indonesia, Paraguay, Peru, Brazil, Colombia, Uganda, Connecticut, Virginia, Kentucky, Maryland, Pennsylvania. We have tobacco that's up to 16 years old. And so by having the flexibility in how I manufacture cigars and how I run through my inventory, that gives me more opportunity to have flexibility in the blending processes. In a traditional environment, you're going to have one blend in 4 or 5 sizes. And every time you change the size of that cigar, you're going to change the flavor slightly because you're changing the ratios of tobacco that it requires to make up that particular size. My goal is to create cigars that are perfect in that one size. Rather than making 4 or 5 sizes of one cigar, I'd rather make one size for each cigar and have 4 or 5 unique blends that we're able to offer. That gives us a unique portfolio of cigars that are designed with intent, that are designed with the experience in mind, whether it's a cigar that's made specifically to pair with our coffee or a cigar that's made to specifically pair with a chocolate peanut butter stout beer. We're looking at the intent of how the cigar is going to be smoked, in what environment the cigar is going to be smoked, and what I want that cigar to invoke in that consumer. I'm looking at these various experiences that I want the customer to have with that particular cigar in that particular size. If we're making a cigar to pair with an espresso, the espresso is quick. It's a small drink. So you don't want a cigar that's going to last 2 hours to have with one espresso. So we make it in a Corona size. Looking at these opportunities in a different way to create these blends creates really unique flavors, creates really unique experiences in a way that no other manufacturer does currently. So I encourage you to try some of our cigars. I encourage you to go out and try other blenders and understand the manufacturer, understand the blender, learn about these blenders, learn about Pepin Garcia's history, learn about AJ Fernandez's history, learn about the motivations that they have behind their cigars, some of these famous Cuban blenders, master blenders, and understand how they blend and what their intent is. But also consider when they're producing their cigars, there are going to be limitations in terms of the volume requirements and things like that. Whereas small manufacturers like myself, Martinez Cigar in New York, I mean, there's so many small manufacturers in the U.S. that can that would appreciate your support. They're able to blend in a different way to give you unique flavors that you're not going to find in some of the mass-produced cigars. So, in terms of blending, once we understand flavor, we want to understand the motivation. Once we understand the motivation, then we can blend the cigar. Because now we're looking at parameters, we're looking at size, we're looking at shape, we're looking at what we want to accomplish. So based on those parameters, if it's a 50 ring gauge cigar, I have to operate within the confines of a 50 ring gauge cigar and have enough tobacco to where it feels dense, but not too much tobacco where it plugs. So working within those confines as a blender, it helps me understand how much tobacco I can fit. And then from that point, I have to understand which tobaccos to select. Once I understand the experience that I want to create, if I want the cigar to have an oily, creamy mouthfeel, now that's going to require more residual oil from the tobacco itself to carry into the smoke, which requires more ligero content. So when I'm selecting the tobaccos, I want to understand, am I going to have a higher ligero content in the tobacco to have more oils and boldness of flavor? Or do I want it to be more dry so that way it's not overpowering? So every cigar is going to have its own purpose. Once you decide that purpose, then you start understanding which tobaccos you want to have into that cigar. Which tobaccos are going to give you those oils, which tobaccos are going to give you the aromas, which tobaccos are going to give you the flavors. And then you can start blending from that point forward. So I recommend try as many cigars as you can, inform your palate, expand your vocabulary of flavor, and make sure that as you're doing that, have an open mind. Try to understand what the blender had in mind for that cigar. Oftentimes we find people holding on to cigars thinking that if we put it in a humidor and let it sit for a year or 2 years, it's going to get better. I had clients in today, as a matter of fact, and we were talking about peak. And that means that when you put a cigar in a humidor, at some point, the flavors will become neutralized and you'll get a very neutral tobacco flavor across your cigars the longer you leave it in a humidor. And we talked about how the tobacco picks up the environment. The environment of the humidor, the Spanish cedar, will start imparting flavor and aroma into the cigar. So I recommend smoke the cigar now. It's meant to be smoked. The manufacturer has already done their process. They've already aged the tobacco as long as they needed to. They've already let the cigar rest as long as they feel that it needed to. And they put it into the market, ready to smoke. Letting it sit in the humidor for another month or another 2 months might mellow some of the flavors down. It might give you a little bit more of that Spanish cedar element. But ultimately, the longer you leave it in that humidor, the less of the nuanced flavors and the original intent you will have when you do experience that cigar. Think of it like putting whiskey in a barrel. The longer you put whiskey in a barrel, the more it tastes like the barrel and the less it tastes like the original whiskey. Cigars are the same way. So go out there, enjoy, expand your mind, expand your knowledge, expand your flavors, expand your vocabulary. And while you're at it, give some of our cigars a try. Try some of the other local manufacturers or domestic manufacturers who are small operations. Support those businesses. I would appreciate any feedback you guys can give me. If you want to tell me any other videos that you want me to put together for you, please drop it in the comments. I appreciate all of your support. As always, thank you. Follow us on socials at Ultimo Cigars. Please subscribe, like, and all the other good stuff. I'll see you again soon. Thank you very much.